Captain Joran Hale hated politics. Always had. Preferred the clarity of a firing solution over a council vote. The UNS Old Man's Promise drifted silently among the debris of Valorian defense satellites, their twisted wreckage glinting like black teeth in the void. Hale's hands were clasped behind his back, his eyes scanning the shattered field, counting what remained. They never saw us. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Rena Cho, said softly, voice tense but calm. Hale nodded. They weren't supposed to. No one had ever expected humans to react this way. The Council had assumed retaliation would be measured. Formal. Predictable. A declaration, maybe a token strike, a warning. Instead, humanity had vanished. Quiet, patient, and lethal. The raids, the sanctioned, enforcement operations, had triggered a response that no species could anticipate. Not even the Valorians, whose fleets were built to intimidate entire star systems. Captain, Cho continued, pointing at the nearest wreckage. Our boarding teams report survivors on that station. They're surrendering. Hale didn't flinch. Surrender? For them, that's luck. Take it. But check the logs. Make sure nothing's been left behind. The station commander, a trembling Valorian noble, was herded onto the bridge. His crystalline exoskeleton cracked faintly as he tried to form words. You can't do this, he stammered. We're protected by the Council. Hale turned slowly. His eyes were cold, steel gray, and perfectly still. You're protected by distance, he said quietly. You miscalculated how far we travel. The noble's mouth opened again. Hale raised his hand. A stunned pulse hummed through the air. The noble dropped instantly, unconscious. No speeches. No negotiations. Consequence, pure and immediate. Across the frontiers, the same scene repeated. Outposts surrendered when they saw the banners. The banners were hand-painted, darkly humorous, an insult deliberately broadcast across sensor grids. Don't start none, read one. Another declared, we remember who voted yes. Meanwhile, human infantry made war look like a schoolyard trick. On the Los 9, the Carthy War brood charged trenches with a roar meant to intimidate. They died screaming louder. Mines disguised as corpses. Turrets baited with distress beacons. Artillery timed to respiration cycles. Human soldiers fought with brutal, unflinching precision, and a sense of dark humor that unnerved even their own allies. Hey, Sarge! A soldier laughed into the comms, crouched behind scorched rubble. They still think bayonet charges work. Let 'em, the sergeant replied, voice rough. We're almost out of ammo, and then it's our turn to remind them why humans like improvisation. By the third month, Council casualty estimates had crossed 1 billion. And still, humans lost barely a fraction. That disparity terrified the galaxy more than the actual destruction. It wasn't raw firepower that scared them, it was efficiency, patience, and the memory of grievance. Then the Council made a final, catastrophic misstep. Desperate to contain humanity, desperate to assert power, they authorized the use of planetary pacification weapons. Glass Earth-level devastation. Kill everything and everyone and claim it as law. They never got the chance. Every Council ship sent toward human territory entered a dense, near-impenetrable web of human sensor nets. The first volleys disabled weapons before firing. Fleets dropped out of jump space into traps so precise, so cruel, they looked like space itself had teeth. Some ships never transmitted a distress call. Others broadcasted only static, and then screams. Across the void, humans did not gloat. They did not celebrate. They simply executed the plans drawn up in quiet months before the Council had even realized humanity remembered their names. Hale sat in the command chair, staring at the map, his reflection ghosting across the viewport. They still think this is a species, he muttered. It's a grudge. Cho swallowed. We're not monsters, right? Hale finally turned, expression softening for a fraction of a second. We're human. That's worse. And worse, indeed, it was. Every operation was surgical. Every strike deliberate. Every survivor left alive to remember. When civilian evac pods were deployed, they weren't for humans, they were for aliens. To see what happened. To understand who had miscalculated. Humanity wanted witnesses. Every commander, politician, and bureaucrat who had signed the necessary raids now knew humans did not forgive. They did not negotiate. They did not forget. By the 6th month, entire council sectors were in chaos. The aliens began fighting each other, scrambling for power, resources, and safety, while human fleets hovered at the edge of every battlefield like silent judges. In one particularly grim engagement, a Valorian admiral tried to bluff his way past the human blockade with a fleet of over 300 vessels. One human carrier launched a decoy convoy. The Valorians followed it. Every ship was destroyed before they realized the real fleet had jumped ahead, waiting. By the time the Council's Central Command understood what happened, the Admiral had been captured. His last words, broadcast galaxy-wide, were, They fight differently." Hale heard the transmission and smiled faintly. Not because of cruelty, but because humanity had done exactly what they always said they would never do. They had made war their own way. It was efficient. It was horrifying. And it was just the beginning. The Galactic Council Chamber had survived wars that burned stars and treaties written in the ashes of extinct civilizations. It had never been afraid of silence. Now silence ruled the chamber like a predator. 700 delegates sat frozen in their biothrones, scaled tails coiled tight, mandibles twitching, frills flared in involuntary panic. The vast holographic dais at the center still glowed faintly, empty except for the residual distortion of the human feed that had just gone dark. No farewell. No threats. No demands. Just one sentence. "We do not negotiate with civilizations that mistake mercy for weakness." The echo of it still crawled through the chamber. Councillor Threx of the Valorian Combine broke first. His crystalline vocal cords rasped as he leaned forward. "This is posturing," he insisted, though his eyes refused to leave the empty platform. "They always posture. Deathworld species rely on theatrics." No one answered him. Supreme Arbiter Zalion, whose kind had ruled empires before humanity had invented agriculture, felt something ancient coil in his chest cavity. Fear. Not panic. Not shock. Recognition. Humans had been quiet for too long. "They cut all channels," murmured the Carthy matron, her insectoid limbs clicking sharply. "Civilian frequencies. Trade relays. Diplomatic pings. Everything." "That's impossible," Threx snapped. "Their economy is irrelevant," Zalion interrupted. His frills trembled, betraying him. "They are not isolating themselves. They are withdrawing consent." That phrase rippled uneasily through the chamber. Consent was the foundation of council power. The illusion that every member species agreed the system was fair, that sanctions were lawful, that peacekeeping actions were regrettable but necessary. The humans had signed those treaties. They had obeyed them. Until now. A junior analyst burst into the chamber, ignoring protocol. "Arbiter! Human space just went dark. Entire sectors. No civilian traffic. No comms bleed. Only encrypted military bursts, and there are millions of them." The chamber erupted. "They're mobilizing. No, they're panicking. This is illegal under council law." Zalion slammed his authority staff against the floor. "Enough!" The noise died, but the fear didn't. He turned slowly, his gaze locking onto Threx. "Remind the council what actions preceded this misunderstanding." Threx hesitated. That alone was damning. "The sanctions were necessary," Threx said at last. "Human expansion was destabilizing border regions. Their colonies encroached on protected economic zones." "Protected by whom?" the matron hissed. "The council," Threx replied stiffly. "And the raids?" Zalion asked quietly. Threx's mandibles tightened. "Limited enforcement actions." Everyone knew what that meant. Human mining colonies seized under fabricated violations. Civilian transports mistakenly intercepted. Orbital habitats disabled for resisting inspections. Thousands dead, labeled collateral. Because humans were supposed to complain, protest, file appeals. They were new, passionate, predictable. A species that still believed rules mattered. The lights dimmed without warning. Council security scrambled, weapons rising. Then the central platform flared to life again, this time without authorization. A human woman appeared. No insignia. No visible rank. Just a dark coat, silver hair pulled tight, and eyes that didn't blink often enough to feel alive. "I am Admiral Mara Vance," she said calmly. "United Human Defense Command." Multiple delegates tried to override the feed. They failed. "You have 20 seconds," Vance continued. "After that, this channel will close forever." A countdown appeared above her shoulder. 20. 19. "This is a violation of," Threx began. "Silence," Vance said, not raising her voice. The word landed like a weapon. Threx physically recoiled. "Your fleets entered human-controlled space without declaration," Vance said. "Your peacekeepers fired on civilian habitats. Your economic sanctions starved border worlds that had no military presence." 15 seconds. "We submitted protests," she continued. "We followed procedure. We sent ambassadors." Her lips twitched, not quite a smile. "You voted." 10 seconds. "You assumed restraint meant weakness," Vance said. "You assumed we would negotiate harder." She leaned forward, eyes burning into the chamber. "We don't negotiate after you've made your decision." 5 seconds. "We remember," she said softly. The feed cut. The hologram vanished. So did every human presence in Council space. Across the galaxy, warning sirens erupted. Shipyards reported dormant human hulls activating, ancient designs pulled from reserve, their heat signatures unfamiliar and terrifying. Asteroid belts bloomed with weapon platforms that had never been there yesterday. Civilian freighters began shedding cargo modules, revealing armored cores beneath. Human space didn't mobilize. It reconfigured. "They're forming perimeter kill zones," an analyst whispered. "Layered. Redundant. Brutally efficient." Zalian stared at the star map as human territories shifted, not expanding, but hardening. Borders became walls. Corridors became traps. On the fringe of Valorian space, a human fleet dropped out of hyperspace without warning. No broadcast. No demands. Just presence. Hundreds of ships, silent and perfectly aligned, their hulls scarred and mismatched. Civilian conversions, military relics, things never meant to fight together. They didn't advance. They didn't fire. They waited. A Valorian patrol approached, transmitting standard challenge codes. The human fleet did not respond. The patrol commander hesitated. Then one human ship powered a single weapon. Not targeting. Just powering. The energy spike alone crippled 3 Valorian vessels. The message was clear. "We're already here." Back in the council chamber, Zalian felt the truth settle like a weight on his ancient bones. The humans had not rejected diplomacy out of anger. They had rejected it because it was no longer relevant. War had already been decided, and humanity was simply executing the outcome. The Galactic Council convened again, though the chamber looked nothing like its former self. Smoke-stained walls, cracked hollow panels, missing delegates, the ghosts of failures past seemed to haunt the empty seats. Only half the member species remained. The others had either surrendered outright to humans or simply ceased to exist. Supreme Arbiter Zalian barely recognized the chamber. Every decision, every vote, every sanction had been dissected and punished with surgical precision. Humanity had not merely retaliated, they had rewritten the rules. And now, a single human stood at the center of the chamber. Not Admiral Vance, not a military figurehead, but someone far worse in its subtle, terrifying way. An older man, wearing simple civilian clothing, hands clasped loosely at his sides. A faint smile tugged at his lips, but it never reached his eyes. "My name," he began, voice calm but resonant, carrying effortlessly through the chamber, "is Elias Grant. I am a historian." Confusion rippled among the delegates. A historian? Not an admiral, not a tactician? "I am here because you still don't understand why you lost," Grant continued, his tone steady, deliberate. "You think it was our weapons, our fleets, our tactics." He shook his head slowly. "You misread us. Every single step you took, you assumed we would act like the species you were used to, predictable, emotional, bounded by your rules." A Valorian officer hissed in disbelief. Our forces were technologically superior. Grant raised a hand, and the officer's protest died mid-word. "Your fleets crossed into our space. Your borders were violated, your civilians harmed. And yet you assumed humanity would respond politely. That you could bargain for mercy." He paused, letting the words sink in. "We don't bargain. We remember." He activated a holographic feed behind him. Archival footage from Earth, long-buried histories, grainy videos of wars, famines, genocides, political betrayals, all curated meticulously. Children hiding in shelters. Families lost. Cities burned. And always, humans enduring, learning, adapting. "So many wars," Grant said softly. "So many mistakes. We survived. Not because we were strong, but because we remembered who had watched us, who had profited, and who had voted yes. Every raid, every sanction, every council decision against humanity is logged. Every name recorded." Gasps, hisses, and clicks of disbelief echoed through the chamber. "You attacked us expecting outrage," Grant continued, voice rising now with a quiet ferocity. "Expecting negotiation, expecting fear. You got bookkeeping. You got witnesses. And now," he gestured at the chamber, "you are accountable, not to us, but to your own actions exposed." A scream rang out from the back of the chamber. A young Carthy delegate clawed at the floor, her mandibles snapping frantically. "What do you want from us?" Grant smiled faintly. "Nothing. That's the part you cannot process. We're not here for revenge. We're here for justice. And sometimes, justice looks a lot like memory." He tapped a console, and a star map unfolded, showing council space fractured into chaos. Borders redrawn, not conquered, not colonized, but fortified. Civilian sectors preserved. But every strategic, political, and military node now under human observation. "We are withdrawing from the council," Grant said. "Effective immediately. Humanity will govern itself, and you will govern yourselves. Or fail. We do not care." The chamber reeled. Zalyun stammered. You cannot simply leave us like this. The power vacuums." Grant's eyes locked onto him. "We know." Then the final blow, a data packet, transmitted to every remaining delegate. Names, votes, justifications, transcripts, records of every sanction, every decision, every vote against humanity. Nothing left hidden. The Council's authority was now completely transparent, and utterly undermined. Grant stepped back. "We are not your rulers. We are your memory." The feed ended. Silence fell over the chamber again, heavier than ever. Not because humans had destroyed fleets or planets, but because the threat of their memory lingered, permanent, impartial, unavoidable. Outside, alarms erupted, not from attack, but from internal revolt. Former client species, formerly loyal to the Council, rose up against their masters. Old grudges, old betrayals, ignited in flames of revenge. And humanity? They watched. And waited. Hale, aboard the Old Man's Promise, checked his console from a hidden jump point outside the sector. "They're reacting," he said. "Exactly as predicted. The dominoes are falling." Cho nodded. "And we didn't fire a single shot at the Council itself." Hale allowed himself a grim smile. "No. We just reminded them who remembers. That's enough." Across the galaxy, humans became something far more terrifying than conquerors. They became arbiters of consequence, patient and unflinching. And in every heart that had once considered humanity weak, doubt now festered like a slow poison. Never underestimate the species that remembers. 5 years later, the galaxy had changed in ways the Council could never have imagined. Formerly dependent systems had carved out fragile independence. Old client states wavered between rebellion and survival. And humanity? They were everywhere and nowhere, silent yet omnipresent. A human freighter glided into a neutral trade hub once controlled by the Council. The docking clamps hissed, metal scraping against metal. A single human woman stepped down from the ramp, carrying crates of medical supplies. Not weapons. Not propaganda. Supplies. The alien merchant approaching her froze. His limbs quivered with instinctive fear. You're not here to fight? He asked, voice trembling. She smirked faintly. God, no. War's bad for business. The hub buzzed with activity. Former enemies traded cautiously, rebuilding alliances under the quiet oversight of human observers. No broadcasts of conquest. No occupation. Just presence. Quiet, unmistakable, and inescapable. Why help us after everything? The merchant asked. The woman shrugged, placing the crate carefully. Because we already won, she said. And because someday, you might forget why you shouldn't try that again. She paused, looking up at the stars. Also, she added dryly, we like being underestimated. Keeps things interesting. Nearby, human warships lingered. Not oppressive. Not threatening. Just present. Watching. Waiting. Enough to remind every species in the sector that every action carried consequence. Across the galaxy, human strategy had taken root. Not as conquerors, but as the species that remembered. Every insult, every attack, every vote against humanity, etched into memory, carried patiently across decades, and delivered with perfect timing. In the Council's old capital, abandoned halls echoed with whispers. Zalion's frills shivered at the thought of what remained unsaid. Species once loyal to the Council now plotted, revolted, and punished one another, all under the shadow of humans who were absent, but always present in memory. Back aboard the Old Man's Promise, Captain Hale checked the latest comms logs. No alarms. No calls for help. Only confirmations of trade, survival, and quiet victories. Cho leaned back, watching the feed. And they still don't know we're watching? Hale smiled faintly, a glint of dark humor in his eyes. They'll figure it out. Eventually. But by then, it won't matter. They'll remember the lesson before they even understand it. Somewhere, an alien child listened to an old Terran proverb translated into 100 languages. Beware the quiet ones. Because when humans stop talking, they've already decided how the story ends. Humanity's victory was complete, not through total annihilation, not through dominance, but through patience, intelligence, and the simple, terrifying truth of memory. They were the species that endured. The species that remembered. The species that no one would ever dare underestimate again. And that was enough.